Right after sex, your body makes a decision before you do, and it silently changes how you feel, think, and see the person beside you. Right after sex, something quietly unsettling happens, something most people feel, but almost no one truly understands. One person turns away, eyes heavy, already slipping into sleep as if a switch has been flipped. The other stays awake, suddenly more present, more aware, wanting to talk, to connect, to hold on to the moment just a little longer. Same experience, same room, two completely different endings. I've always found that strange, not in a dramatic, relationship-driven way, but in a biological one. Because if two bodies go through the same act, why do they come out of it feeling like they lived through two entirely different realities? At first, it's easy to explain it away: personality, emotional needs, maybe even compatibility. But the deeper I looked, the less convincing those explanations became. There was a pattern to it, something consistent, almost predictable, and patterns like that don't come from preference. They come from programming. Beneath the surface, something far more precise is happening. Your brain is releasing chemicals in exact sequences. Your nervous system is firing signals without asking for your permission. Your body is already deciding how you will feel, before you even realize that you're feeling it. Think about that for a second. What if the way you react after sex, whether you feel close or distant, energized or drained, talkative or silent, is not really you making a choice? What if it's your biology finishing the story? That idea changes everything. Because it means a lot of the confusion, the misinterpretation, even the quiet disappointments that happen in that moment might not be personal at all. They might be physiological. So instead of guessing, I want to understand. I want to look beneath the surface and trace what's actually happening inside the body during and after sex, the hidden processes shaping behavior in real time. And to do that, we need to start where the shift is most dramatic, inside the male body, at the exact moment control is lost, and biology takes over completely. So if we're going to understand that strange shift afterward, we have to begin at the exact moment when control quietly disappears. At some point during sex, the male body crosses a threshold that feels almost invisible from the outside, but internally, it's absolute. Scientists call it ejaculatory inevitability, the point where the body takes over and there's no turning back. Up until that moment, there's still a sense of control, a possibility to pause or slow down. But once that line is crossed, everything becomes automatic. Heart rate climbs, breathing deepens, muscles begin contracting in a precise rhythm that the brain no longer needs to consciously guide. And then, in a brief surge, the body releases everything it has been building toward. But what stays with me isn't the intensity of that peak, it's what happens immediately after. There's a sudden, almost dramatic shift. It's as if the system that was just fully activated begins powering down. Energy drops, sensitivity changes, and more importantly, something happens in the brain that most people never think about. A wave of chemicals floods the system. Serotonin softens the mind into calmness. Oxytocin adds a subtle layer of bonding. But the dominant signal comes from prolactin, the hormone that tells the body, in very clear terms, that the job is done. Satisfaction sets in, but so does a kind of biological closure. Desire fades, sometimes almost instantly. And that's when the body demands rest. What might look like indifference from the outside is often just the nervous system recalibrating. The refractory period begins, a stretch of time where arousal isn't just unlikely, it's physiologically suppressed. For some, it passes quickly, for others, it lingers. There are smaller details too, almost easy to overlook: a temporary inability to urinate, caused by internal muscles still engaged in their previous task. A subtle change in the position of the testicles, drawn closer to the body during climax. Even the occasional muscle twitch or cramp, as nerves settle back into baseline. And then, sometimes, there's something less physical but just as real, a quiet emotional dip. After the rise of dopamine, the brain doesn't stay elevated. It comes down, not dramatically, not always noticeably, but enough to shift the internal atmosphere. Which makes me wonder if the male body is designed to complete a cycle and then shut itself down so decisively. What does that same moment feel like in a body that doesn't follow the same rules at all? If the male body moves toward a clear ending, the female body seems to follow a path that doesn't resolve so neatly. What struck me first when I started looking into this is how unpredictable the experience can be. Unlike men, where the biological sequence tends to follow a more consistent arc, the female body doesn't always arrive at orgasm during intercourse. For some, it happens regularly, for others, only occasionally, and for a small percentage, not at all. That alone changes how the entire experience is processed, because the body isn't always reaching the same conclusion. But when orgasm does occur, it doesn't resemble the sharp, singular peak I described earlier. It feels more like a series of waves, rapid, rhythmic contractions moving through the pelvis, the uterus, the surrounding muscles. Not a single release, but a pattern that can rise, soften, and rise again. And what I find fascinating is that there's no built-in shutdown. The female body doesn't enter a strict refractory period. Biologically, it can remain responsive, sometimes even more sensitive than before. Which means the experience doesn't have to end where it peaks, it can continue, evolve, or repeat. There are also aspects that people rarely talk about openly. Some women experience a release of fluid during orgasm, something often misunderstood, but medically recognized and harmless. The body, in that moment, is simply expressing itself in ways that science is still trying to fully explain. But the deeper shift happens in the brain during intense arousal. Regions like the amygdala and hippocampus, areas tied to fear, control, and emotional filtering, become less active. It's almost like the mind steps out of its usual role, allowing the body to take the lead without interference. For a brief window, there's less overthinking, less self-awareness, just immersion. And then, after orgasm, awareness returns, but it returns differently. Oxytocin rises more noticeably, creating a sense of closeness, openness, even a quiet desire to connect. Not out of neediness, but because the body is chemically leaning toward bonding. Which makes me think, if one body is being guided toward rest, and the other toward connection, maybe the mismatch we see afterward isn't a misunderstanding at all. Maybe it's two different biological stories unfolding at the same time. And when you place those two biological stories side by side, the moment after suddenly stops feeling confusing, and starts feeling almost inevitable. For a long time, I think many of us interpret that moment emotionally. One person pulls away, the other leans in, and it's easy to assign meaning to that difference. Distance becomes rejection, the desire to talk becomes neediness. But the more I look at what's happening underneath, the harder it is to see it that way. Because the body is not reacting randomly, it's following instructions. In the male body, the signals after orgasm are clear and decisive. Prolactin rises, and essentially tells the system that the cycle is complete. Desire drops, energy fades, the nervous system shifts into recovery mode. It's not about disengaging from the other person. It's about the body recalibrating after an intense peak. And at the same time, there's less oxytocin driving emotional connection. The chemical that encourages closeness simply isn't as dominant in that moment. So the instinct to stay present, to talk, to extend the experience, isn't being strongly reinforced. In the female body, the signals move in a different direction. Oxytocin rises more prominently, creating a subtle but powerful pull toward connection. The body isn't shutting down, it's opening, emotionally, cognitively, even physically. There's a kind of continuation rather than a conclusion. And without a strict refractory period, there's no biological force pushing for immediate disengagement. So when one person turns inward while the other reaches outward, it's not a contradiction. It's two systems doing exactly what they were designed to do. Of course, not everyone fits perfectly into this pattern. Hormones vary, experiences differ, but the underlying structure is there more often than we realize, and maybe that changes how we interpret each other. Because what if that quiet tension after sex isn't about misunderstanding at all, but about expecting two different biological rhythms to feel the same? And if that's true, then the real question isn't who's right or wrong, it's whether we've ever taken the time to understand the rhythm we're each moving to. And once those rhythms begin to settle, something quieter, but just as important, starts to unfold beneath the surface. What I didn't expect when I first looked into this wasn't the intensity of the experience itself, but the subtle aftermath. That space right after, when everything seems calm again, yet your internal state feels slightly altered. Not dramatically, not always in a way you can easily explain, but different enough to notice. For some, there's a deep sense of relaxation, almost like a weight has been lifted, muscles loosen, breathing slows. The body feels lighter, as if tension that had been building quietly in the background has finally been released. It's easy to mistake that for simple tiredness, but it feels more complete than that, like a system resetting itself. But then, there are moments that feel harder to interpret, a slight emotional drop, a sense of stillness that borders on emptiness. Not sadness exactly, but a kind of quiet neutrality that replaces the intensity that came before. When I first came across this, it reminded me of something familiar, the way the brain comes down after any heightened state. Because during sex, dopamine rises, it creates that feeling of reward, of pleasure, of focus. And like any spike, it doesn't stay there, it returns to baseline. Sometimes gently, sometimes more noticeably, and in that return, your perception shifts. For many men, this drop can feel more pronounced, almost like the energy that filled the moment has been completely spent. For women, the emotional tone often moves differently, less of a drop, more of a soft continuation, influenced by lingering oxytocin that keeps the sense of connection alive a little longer. Same event, different internal resolution, and that's the part that stays with me. We often think of sex as something that begins and ends in a clear, defined moment. But biologically, it doesn't really end there. It fades, transitions, and reshapes how you feel in the minutes, and sometimes hours, that follow. So the next time you notice a shift you can't quite explain, instead of questioning it, maybe just observe it. Because chances are, it's not random. It's your body completing a cycle it has always known how to finish. What this reveals is something deeper than just biology, it's perspective. Many of the moments we misinterpret in relationships are not personal flaws, but natural biological responses. When you understand how your body and your partner's body actually work, frustration turns into awareness, and confusion turns into empathy. Instead of reacting emotionally, you begin to observe, understand, and respond more wisely. That shift alone can change how you experience connection, not just in intimacy, but in everyday life. So let me ask you a simple question. After learning this, do you see those after moments differently? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments so everyone can learn from different perspectives. And if you found this insightful, don't forget to subscribe to support the channel and stay with us for the next deep exploration.